Imagine standing on the edge of a vast desert horizon as the sun rises over endless dunes. Less than 100 years before, a messenger named Muhammad had united tribes across Arabia through faith and courage. When he passed away, the community faced a moment of uncertainty and hope. Leaders emerged, known as caliphs, meaning successors to the prophet. They carried the weight of guiding millions in a new faith called Islam. In just a few decades, armies marched beyond Arabia's sands into distant lands. Cities once unknown to the desert travelers became centers of power and learning. Cultures mixed and blended under a single banner. Ideas flowed along desert routes and green river valleys. These first leaders faced impossible challenges. Their choices set patterns for law, art, and education. This was the beginning of a story that would shape the world for centuries. From dusty tents under starry skies to grand palaces by riverbanks, the Arab Caliphates grew at an astonishing pace. Under their rule, a new worldview took shape. Trade routes stretched from the Atlantic coasts of Spain to the fertile lands of Mesopotamia. Scholars debated beneath ornate arches in cities like Damascus and Baghdad. Artisans carved marble and wrote poems that still echo today. Medical texts spread knowledge of the human body. Mathematics found new paths in algebra and geometry. Poetry flourished in tents and courts alike. These changes did not happen by accident. They grew from a simple message of faith and social justice. Over 600 years, 3 great dynasties would rise and leave a lasting mark on history. First came the Rashidun, the rightly guided leaders who knew the Prophet personally. They led from 632 to 661 and set the pattern for future caliphs. Next came the Umayyads, a family that built a dynasty from Damascus and ruled until 750. They spread the empire further into North Africa and Spain. Then the Abbasids took power and moved the capital to Baghdad in 762. Under Abu al-Abbas and his descendants, the empire became a center of learning and culture. Scholars from many lands gathered to share ideas. During their golden age, the arts and sciences reached new heights. Later, political power fragmented, but the memory of this era lived on. Each period added layers to a story that shaped 3 continents. After Muhammad's death in 632, Abu Bakr was chosen as the first caliph. He faced the Ridda Wars, a series of rebellions by tribes that refused to follow the new authority. Loyalty to Islam was tested and then restored by decisive action. Abu Bakr's forces retook lost territories and convinced tribes that unity was vital. He also sent armies north into the Byzantine lands, marking the first steps beyond Arabia. Despite limited resources, the caliph pressed on, believing that faith and discipline would carry his soldiers. He appointed close companions as governors, setting an early system of provincial rule. He established a public treasury to handle funds for welfare and defense. He made sure the community contributed fairly to support state needs. His leadership style was firm but just, keeping the focus on unity over wealth. By the time of his death in 634, the Muslim community was intact and ready for greater challenges. His choices laid a strong base for expansion across continents. Umar ibn al-Khattab became caliph in 634 and ruled for 10 years. He led armies into Iraq and Syria, defeating the great Sassanid Empire at Qadisiyah and capturing the Persian capital Ctesiphon. Under his command, Egypt also fell to Muslim armies, cutting the Byzantine Empire's grain supply. He organized a far-sighted administration. Roads and bridges were built to connect provinces. Umar introduced a census to record the people and resources. He set up a public fund to help the poor and orphans. Judges were appointed to apply fair rules in each region. He enforced the principle that no one was above the law. His simple living style won respect among rich and poor alike. By 644, the empire reached its largest size under a single ruler until that time. Umar's bold policy shaped the next centuries of governance. When Umar died in 644, Uthman ibn Affan took up the mantle. He guided the community but faced growing tensions among distant provinces. Recognizing the need for unity, he ordered an official copy of the Quran to be compiled and sent to the major cities. This effort preserved the text for generations to come. At the same time, complaints arose about the appointment of governors who were seen as too close to his family. Some accused him of favoritism and neglecting the needy. Dissent grew louder as local leaders felt their voices were ignored. In 656, a group of rebels surrounded his house in Medina and assassinated him. His supporters mourned a leader who had spent wealth on public causes. Merchants remembered his fair judgments in court. Scholars recalled his patience and humble manner. His murder left a lasting wound in the Muslim mind, marking a turning point in political life. Ali ibn Abi Talib became caliph after Uthman's death, but peace did not last. He faced two major battles against those who demanded justice for Uthman's killing. At the Battle of the Camel, supporters of Aisha clashed with his forces near Basra. Later at Siffin, he faced Muawiyah, governor of Syria, in a fight over who should rule. When Ali agreed to arbitration, a group called the Kharijites rejected any compromise and broke away. They believed only purity of faith mattered. In 661, one of them assassinated Ali while he prayed in a mosque in Kufa. His death marked the end of the Rashidun line. Under his rule, he tried to set up fair laws and reduce taxes on the poor. He wrote letters and essays on moral guidance that later students preserved. His followers saw him as a model of integrity and courage. The selection of his children, Hassan and Hussein, would inspire future generations. The era of the four rightly guided caliphs lasted only 30 years but set deep roots. These leaders learned from the Prophet's example and tried to rule according to his teachings. They prioritized justice, charity, and consultation. Public funds were used to help widows, orphans, and the needy. New lands joined the community not by force alone, but by agreements that allowed local customs under the umbrella of Islam. Arabic became a common language, linking diverse peoples. A simple form of government developed, one that balanced authority with advice. This model influenced later rulers who claimed inspiration from these early years. Stories of the caliphs spread among poets and historians. The Rashidun period remains a benchmark of ideal leadership for many Muslims today. When civil war ended in 661, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan emerged as the new ruler and founded the Umayyad dynasty. He moved the capital to Damascus, a city on ancient trade routes. Under his reign, a more settled bureaucracy took shape. He declared Arabic the official language for government and court records, uniting diverse peoples under one tongue. He minted coins with simple Islamic declarations, replacing Byzantine and Persian designs. He appointed governors and built roads to link distant provinces. The Caliphate extended west across North Africa, reaching as far as modern Morocco. In the east, armies marched into Central Asia and the Sindh region in present-day Pakistan. The navy grew stronger, guarding the Mediterranean. He negotiated treaties with Christian rulers and kept peace along the borders. Taxes were collected in a standard form, building a reliable public fund. Although some criticized the dynasty as favoring its own family, the Umayyads established a lasting state system that would shape the political map for centuries to come. In 711, an army led by Tariq ibn Ziyad crossed from North Africa into the Iberian Peninsula. This bold move surprised the Visigothic rulers and led to a rapid conquest. Within a few years, most of Spain was under Umayyad control and became known as Al-Andalus. Cities like Córdoba and Granada flourished as centers of trade and learning. Rich farmland produced olive oil, grain, and wine for markets in North Africa and the East. New irrigation systems drew water to dry fields. Local Christians and Jews lived under a special legal status, allowed to practice their faith in return for a small tax. Scholar poets wrote in Arabic and local dialects, crafting verses that still inspire today. Libraries gathered thousands of manuscripts from Greek, Latin, and Arabic sources. Architecture blended Roman and Islamic styles in grand buildings with horseshoe arches and tiled courtyards. Trade ships sailed from Seville to ports in North Africa and beyond, carrying silk and spices. For the next 3 centuries, Al-Andalus shone as a jewel of the Islamic world. Under the Umayyads, the empire's administration became more complex. They divided the lands into provinces, each under a governor who reported back to Damascus. A uniform tax system collected land tax, poll tax, and trade duties. Non-Muslims paid a special tax called jizya, while Muslims contributed zakat, a religious levy for charity. The use of Arabic in courts and records replaced regional languages, helping officials communicate clearly. Postal stations appeared every few days along main roads, carrying messages quickly between capitals. Military garrisons were set up near borders to guard against raids. Public works funded fountains and wells in cities and towns, improving everyday life. Judges, known as qadis, applied Islamic law with guidance from the city's chief magistrate. Scholars began teaching in study circles near mosques, passing knowledge to eager students. News of court decisions traveled by courier along caravan routes, spreading legal standards across the far-flung empire. Caliphs sent inspectors to ensure fairness and to prevent local leaders from growing too powerful. This organized system allowed the Umayyad state to last for nearly a century despite challenges from rival dynasties and distant provinces. The Umayyad period saw remarkable architecture that blended art and devotion. The Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, completed in 691, stands as an early example of Islamic design. Its golden dome and intricate mosaics reflect Byzantine influence and local craftsmanship. In Damascus, the great mosque rose from an earlier church, using columns and arches to create a sacred space for worship. The mosque's courtyard provided room for thousands of worshippers on Friday prayers. Palaces like Qasr al-Hayr and Qasr Amra displayed frescoes of hunting scenes, animals, and daily life. Decorative scripts of Quranic verses were carved on walls and tiles. Mosaic artists used colored glass and stone to depict trees, rivers, and sky without human figures. Courtyards were paved with patterned stones that led to shaded arcades. Fountains provided water for ritual washing before prayer, ensuring cleanliness before worship. The blend of styles honored local traditions while creating something uniquely Islamic, inspiring later generations across the empire. Pilgrims and traders alike would marvel at the beauty that symbolized a new age. Despite its achievements, the Umayyad dynasty faced serious opposition. In 680, Yazid the Firman became caliph and demanded loyalty from Hussein, grandson of the Prophet. Hussein refused to pledge allegiance, fearing injustice. He gathered a small group of supporters and set out from Mecca toward Kufa. Near Karbala, he and his companions were surrounded by Umayyad forces. Hussein and most of his followers were killed in a brutal battle. This tragedy moved many hearts and marked the beginning of a distinct Shia identity in Islam. Each year, mourners would recall the events, keeping alive the memory of sacrifice against tyranny. The Islamic world began to split along political and religious lines. These tensions continued to shape debates about leadership even after the Umayyads fell. Opposition to Umayyad rule grew in many regions. In eastern lands, supporters of the Prophet's uncle Abbas formed a secret movement. They promised a return to fair rule and open council. In 747, the Abbasid Revolution began with uprisings in Khorasan. Black banners of the Abbasids spread through the provinces. Local tribes and soldiers joined their cause, tired of distant governors and heavy taxes. In 750, the remaining Umayyad Caliph was defeated near the Great Zab River in today's Iraq. Only one family member, Abd al-Rahman, escaped to Al-Andalus and set up a new Umayyad court in Cordoba. Meanwhile, the Abbasids took power in Baghdad, promising a new era. The change of dynasty showed that even great empires could shift when people demanded justice. The first Abbasid Caliph, Abu al-Abbas al-Safa, ruled briefly but set the tone for a different style of leadership. He eliminated most members of the old Umayyad family to prevent revenge and used loyal soldiers from Khorasan to guard his court. His successor, al-Mansur, focused on building a new capital called Baghdad in 762. The site lay near the Tigris River and became known as the City of Peace. Its circular walls and wide streets invited merchants and scholars. Bureaucrats wrote in neat Arabic script on paper imported from China. Wealth from trade and tribute filled the new treasury, funding public works. Caliphs held regular councils of advisors, learning from each voice. This openness to ideas laid the foundation for what would become a golden age. Under the early Abbasids, the empire's heart shifted east, closer to the Silk Road and to lands rich in ancient cultures. Building Baghdad took nearly a decade, but the result was a planned city unlike any other. Persian engineers designed a circular layout centered on the caliph's palace and a grand mosque. From above, the city looked like a giant coin or wheel. Wide avenues led to markets where traders sold spices, silk, and gold. Caravanserais offered safe lodging for merchants traveling long distances. Canals brought fresh water from the river, watering gardens and orchards. Pilgrims on the Hajj route stopped here to rest and share news. The mosque's call to prayer echoed over the rooftops 5 times a day. Libraries began to appear near lecture halls where philosophers gathered to discuss ideas. Craftsmen worked in specialized quarters, producing glassware, textiles, and metalwork. This blend of planning, beauty, and function earned Baghdad fame across continents. For centuries, it would be the beating heart of the Islamic world. In the new capital, scholars welcomed books in many languages. Greek texts on medicine and philosophy were translated into Arabic. Persian histories found new readers. Indian works on mathematics and astronomy were studied and expanded upon. Under the patronage of caliphs like Al-Ma'mun, the House of Wisdom became a center of translation and research. Scholars from Christian, Jewish, and Muslim backgrounds worked side by side. They compared ideas, tested theories, and wrote new treatises. Algebra, a term derived from Arabic, emerged from this mixing of traditions. Observatories measured the stars, improving calendars and navigation. Medical texts from Galen were checked against Arab physicians' own observations. This spirit of inquiry spread beyond Baghdad to cities like Cairo, Cordoba, and Kairouan. The Islamic Golden Age was born from open minds and shared curiosity. This movement not only preserved ancient knowledge but also pushed it forward. It laid groundwork for the later European Renaissance. The House of Wisdom, known as Bait al-Hikmah, became a symbol of learning and discovery. Founded in the early 9th century, it housed thousands of manuscripts. Scholars coded tables of stars, wrote medical encyclopedias, and sharpened the Arabic language. The Caliph provided funds for copying books and paying translators, rooms filled with scrolls and early paper-bound shelves. Assembly halls buzzed with debate on logic, ethics, and the nature of the universe. Librarians cataloged works from India, Persia, Greece, and beyond. Young students traveled to Baghdad to study under renowned teachers. Knowledge spilled back to their homelands when they returned home. This network of learning connected cities across continents. It stood as proof that a ruler's support could lift whole societies. Even today, its memory reminds us of the power of books and ideas. Among the many great minds of this era was Al-Khwarizmi, whose works on algebra gave the world its word for the subject. He introduced systematic solutions for equations and inspired future mathematicians. Al-Razi, another scholar, wrote medical texts that remained standard in Europe for centuries. He described smallpox and measles with clear detail. Al-Farabi wrote on music, logic, and society, blending Greek philosophy with Islamic thought. His idea of an ideal city influenced later thinkers. Ibn Sina, known as Avicenna, compiled a medical encyclopedia used for 1,000 years. Meanwhile, writers like Al-Mutanabi wrote poetry that praised bravery and love with powerful imagery. Scholars debated at court and in homes, walking under moonlit skies as they shared ideas. Libraries in cities like Tunis and Fustat copied these works, spreading them even further. These scholars and writers showed that faith and reason could go hand in hand. Their works traveled along trade routes and shaped minds across cultures. Trade under the Abbasids linked distant lands in a web of commerce. Caravans carried spices, silk, and precious metals along the Silk Road from China to Baghdad. Ships sailed across the Indian Ocean, linking ports in East Africa, Arabia, and India. Baghdad's markets bustled with merchants selling textiles from Persia, dates from the Arabian Gulf, and glassware from Syria. Banks offered letters of credit so traders could travel without carrying heavy coins. Agricultural innovations like new irrigation techniques from Persia and Asia boosted food production. Urban markets attracted artisans and laborers, creating a growing middle class. Caliphs collected customs duties and used them to fund public works. Guilds formed to protect craftsmen and ensure quality. Caravanserais provided safe havens every 50 miles. Coin weights were standardized for fairness across regions. Markets became places of exchange not only for goods but also for ideas. This robust economy made the empire wealthy and dynamic. Art and literature flourished as part of daily life. Calligraphy became a revered craft, turning Quran verses into flowing works of art on walls and scrolls. Poets composed odes praising gardens, love, and courage, recited in courts and tents alike. Musicians played the oud and qanun while dancers performed at festivals. textiles woven with silk and gold thread became luxury goods. Miniature painting emerged, illustrating books with vivid scenes of court life and epic tales. Storytellers spun narratives of heroism and wisdom under candlelight. Libraries funded by wealthy patrons held poetry collections. Scholars wrote histories that recorded the deeds of rulers and the lives of common people. Theater troupes traveled between cities, bringing short plays and comedies to market squares. These works were not just entertainment. They carried moral lessons and celebrated common values. Patrons sponsored artists and writers, seeing their works as a reflection of a civilized and enlightened society. Through art and words, the empire expressed its identity to neighbor and stranger alike. The Abbasid Caliphs maintained a sophisticated bureaucracy under a vizier, or prime minister. Departments handled finance, the postal service, army affairs, and the management of religious endowments. Officials kept records on paper using Arabic script that spread across the empire. Auditors checked provincial accounts to prevent corruption. Local governors had limited autonomy but relied on caliphal directives for major decisions. A network of spies and informants helped the court stay aware of distant troubles. Legal scholars worked with judges to apply Sharia law and royal decrees. Diplomatic envoys traveled to foreign courts, negotiating treaties and exchanging gifts. This structure balanced local needs with central authority. While it could be slow, it gave a clear system for managing the vast empire. Even after political power faded, this model influenced later governments in the Islamic world. By the mid-9th century, the Abbasid Caliphate faced internal unrest and military challenges. Caliph al-Mu'tasim moved the capital to Samarra in 836 to please his Turkish mercenaries. There, the elites built grand palaces and mosques, but tensions grew between soldiers and civilians. Rival army factions fought for influence over the caliph, often marching on Samarra itself. This period, called the Anarchy at Samarra, lasted nearly a decade and weakened central control. Provinces began to act more independently, raising local armies to defend against raids. Revenue fell as lands rebelled or withheld taxes. The once busy canals and markets of Samarra slowed as fear held sway. Public support for the caliphs dwindled when protection failed. Local residents built walls around their quarters to stay safe. This shift marked the start of fragmentation as regional dynasties emerged from the cracks in Abbasid authority. With central authority in decline, regional dynasties seized power. In Egypt, Ahmad ibn Tulun founded the Tulunid state in 868. He built his own capital near Fustat and maintained an army funded by local taxes. In eastern Iran, the Safarid dynasty rose under Yaqub ibn al-Layth around the same time. He captured vast territories, including part of Khorasan and Sistan, challenging Abbasid rule. Some governors in North Africa and Central Asia did the same. They kept the caliph's name on the Friday prayer but acted independently in most matters. They minted their own coins and ran local courts. Trade continued under their watch, but cultural ties to Baghdad grew weaker. This patchwork of semi-autonomous states reflected the empire's fragmentation, yet each region adapted Islamic governance to local needs. In the 10th century, two more groups exerted real control over the Abbasid caliphs. The Buyids, a Shia dynasty from Iran, entered Baghdad in 945 and took over the palace. They allowed the Sunni caliphs to keep the throne but held military and financial power. Later, the Seljuk Turks arrived, defeating the Buyids and restoring Sunni rule. Leaders like Nizam al-Mulk The famous vizier implemented reforms to strengthen administration and justice. The caliph's authority became more spiritual than political, but this arrangement brought stability. Seljuk rulers defended the empire against Byzantines and other foes, calling on volunteers for jihad. They also built madrasas or schools across the lands to promote Sunni scholarship. Under them, the caliphate regained prestige, even as actual governance lay in other hands. Even as political power shifted, cultural life remained vibrant. Cities like Cairo, founded by the Fatimids, and later Mosul and Nishapur, became new centers of learning. Scholars wrote commentaries on the works of earlier thinkers. Sufi mystics began to organize brotherhoods and teach spiritual practices. Poetry in Persian and Arabic reached new heights, celebrating love, nature, and divine union. Science advanced in hospitals where physicians trained students in hands-on clinics. Architects combined old and new styles in madrasas and mausoleums. Trade fairs attracted visitors from distant lands, bringing exotic goods and ideas. Artisans in metalwork, ceramics, and textiles continued to innovate. The Islamic world remained a crossroads of cultures where creativity thrived despite political change. As the empire grew, different spiritual and legal traditions took shape. Scholars formed schools of Islamic law, or madahib, interpreting the Quran and Hadith in systematic ways. The Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali schools offered paths for judges across the lands. At the same time, Sufism spread, teaching a personal path to connect with God through meditation, poetry, and music. Sufi teachers established lodges or khanqahs where seekers gathered. Meanwhile, theologians debated free will, faith, and reason in public discussions. Some argued that human reason should guide interpretation, while others insisted on strict textual readings. These debates enriched the faith and clarified its teachings. They also influenced social life, as communities chose the guidance that spoke to their needs. By the end of the first 6 centuries, Islamic thought had grown into a vast and diverse field. In 1098, Crusader armies reached the Levant, seizing Antioch and later Jerusalem. Muslim rulers, divided by their own rivalries, struggled to unite against this new threat. Saladin, a Kurdish leader under the Ayyubid dynasty, managed to recapture Jerusalem in 1887 and restore Muslim rule. Yet the Crusades troubled trade and divided resources. Meanwhile, Mongols from Central Asia invaded from the east, raiding cities and slaughtering residents. Though they spared the Abbasid Caliphate until later, their presence caused fear and disruption. Local governors had to defend their territories and pay tribute to survive. Internal revolts by peasants and nomads further weakened settled lands. Despite these troubles, cultural exchange continued through trade and scholarship. New alliances formed and old patterns of cooperation adapted to the changing world. By the early 13th century, the Abbasids had ruled in one form or another for nearly 600 years. The caliph lived under the shadow of stronger neighbors like the Khwarezmians and the Crusaders to the west. In 1258, Mongol forces led by Hulagu Khan finally reached Baghdad, breaching its walls and ending the Abbasid political era. Yet this dramatic event lay just beyond our 6th century timeline. Before that final blow, the caliphate was already weakened by years of internal division and outside pressure. Caravans still arrived with silk from China and spices from India. Sufi orders grew stronger, offering spiritual solace in troubled times. Judges upheld law and communities gathered for prayer without fear. These actions showed that the spirit of the caliphate lived on in its people. In the last years before the fall, there remained a quiet confidence that knowledge and faith would endure even if dynasties rose and fell. Looking back on 600 years of Islamic rule, one sees a tapestry of faith, governance, and culture. From small desert communities, armies marched to far corners of the known world. The Rashidun Caliphs taught the importance of justice and consultation. The Umayyads built a powerful state with roads, taxes, and grand buildings. The Abbasids championed learning, opening the gates of knowledge to Greek, Persian, and Indian works. Across these eras, scholars, poets, and builders added layers of skill and beauty. Trade brought wealth and ideas, uniting regions from Spain to Central Asia. Administrative systems balanced central authority with local needs. Religious scholars and leaders guided hearts and minds. Together, these efforts created a civilization that left a lasting imprint on law, art, science, and daily life. The legacy of these caliphates still resonates today. Arabic remains a major world language and the language of the Quran. Many legal principles born under the caliphs influence courts across Muslim lands. Architectural designs inspired by early mosques appear in modern cities. Math and medical knowledge translated in Baghdad paved the way for developments in Europe's Renaissance. Poetry and art from that period continue to inspire writers and artists. Trade routes of old are now highways and rail lines carrying goods across continents. Sufi orders and traditional schools keep spiritual and educational traditions alive. Stories of leaders like Umar al-Mansur and Harun al-Rashid live on in history and legend. This rich heritage reminds us that human creativity and cooperation can change the world. 6 centuries of law, learning, and leadership show that great ideas can take root and spread across cultures. The story of the Arab Caliphates is not just about battles and borders. It is about people seeking meaning and knowledge. It is about the first caliphs striving for justice and the scholars reaching for truth. It is about artists weaving beauty and traders building connections. Though empires rise and fall, these achievements live on in our language, our cities, and our shared human story. When we learn from the past, we find inspiration to build a fairer and more enlightened future. The first 600 years of Islamic history stand as a testament to what faith and open minds can accomplish together.